And the faster you grow, the more you've ad hoc put people into roles, some of whom were able to handle it, some of whom were clearly wrong for the role based on their actual demonstrated performance. Anytime I ask somebody, how would ... it's a crappy way of interviewing. It is absolutely a crappy way of interviewing. I need this person to speak the truth, even when it's unpleasant, even when it's uncomfortable.
Maui Mastermind presents the Business Coach Podcast, answering your questions and providing real actionable insights for building a better, stronger, more profitable business without sacrificing your time, life, or freedom anymore.
Welcome to another episode of The Business Coach. I'm your host, David Finkel, and I have a real treat in store for you today. So I had a question come in from one of our coaching clients. We've been working with various companies in the business coaching program now for years. We've been doing it now for decades. And one of the things that's consistent is that one of the most important skill sets is the skill set of hiring. In this case, one of the clients came to me and I was talking with her. She runs a professional services firm. She's built an extraordinarily successful professional services firm. It's in the top probably 5%, if not higher, of the firms across the United States for what she does. She might even be the best of the best with them. I mean, she really is that good, and her firm is. And as she's grown so fast that she's left some holes in her leadership team as she goes. So we were talking about how to fill those holes. And so in this episode of the Business Coach Podcast, I want to share with you, and I want to give you the benefit of what I shared coaching her, so that you can use this to best help your rapidly growing company be able to intelligently, effectively, and successfully hire people with it in. So first of all, if you're rapidly growing, chances are you don't have one hole that needs to be filled staff-wise. You have 2, 4, 8. If I get my fingers right. You have a lot of holes. And the faster you grow, the more you've ad hoc put people into roles, some of whom were able to handle it, some of whom were clearly wrong for the role based on their actual demonstrated performance. And you have other roles that you've just lived without, and somebody's covered it, or you've covered it, or you've left it completely uncovered. So it's really hard for you to hire and bring on 4, 8, 16 people that are high-level hires all at once. It's really hard. So the first thing I gave her as coaching was we helped put together a priority sequence of how did she want to sequence these hires. Which hire would be most important first, which hire is second, which third. Part of that is to determine who gets to do that hire. If she's needing to be in there to do that hire, which in this case she would be because these are C-suite level hires, then what it requires for her to recognize is it's not just going to take her time to make the hire, she's going to be involved in the onboard and in the management of that person, getting them up to speed over 3 months or 6 months. And for a high order hire, they might start contributing things after 2 or 3 months, but they're really not going to hit full stride for 6, maybe even 9 or 12 months, but certainly at least 6 months to really kind of learn the lay of the land. They'll add some contribution before then, but their real contributions come later. So to that end, it's a lot of investment for you to make those hires, time being probably the most important or expensive of those investments. So my advice to her was to sequence them through. Which hire, if you did, would actually do the most to free you up so that you could do more of this hiring and onboarding and management you needed to do. In her case, what became clear is the COO role for her company was the most important next hire for her. Great. So now that you've thought about it, if I've got multiple hires I need to do, which do I need to go? I've had other clients where I've coached them. It wasn't a COO that they needed. They needed a personal assistant. Hey, of all the things you could hire, get a great executive assistant. You know, that might be a $40,000 per year hire. Maybe it's a $60,000 per year hire, but that person can help leverage you and give you back 5 or 10 hours per week if they're doing even a reasonable job. And with the 5 or 10 hours per week, now you can go make 2 more hires that for these other holes that you have. So that might be an example. The next part I said to her was to make sure that she took enough time up front to accurately identify what really was the role that needed to be done. How do you measure the success of this role? How would the person know that they're contributing the value that they're there to contribute? How can the company and they know? Getting that clear in writing, the real role description. The average role description, and I've seen hundreds of them, The average role description is complete junk. You're responsible for this task, 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 this task. And that's important to have, but that's just a part of it. Of all those 34 different tasks that you listed off, what's the most important one or two value contributions for the role? Of all the things they do, why are they really on the payroll? And how will they and the company measure their performance on those most important value contributions? What are the key performance indicators that will help you know? What are the metrics you're going to follow? What would be the qualitative way that they and the company know they're doing a great job? Once I've nailed that in writing, first of all, I need that to onboard whoever's going to come on. I need that to manage that person because I need to have a standard to hold them accountable to. Once I have that, now I can go to what for this particular hire, what's the candidate profile that would do that job exceptionally well? What are the skills, experiences, credentials, qualifications, qualities, character traits that they would need to have to do that job, especially the two value contributions that you said, extraordinarily well? And I'm going to narrow that big, massive wish list down to the 5 must-haves, the absolute non-negotiable must-haves, that if he or she doesn't have these 5 qualities, characteristics, experience sets, whatever they are, if they don't have these 5 elements, then they won't be successful doing this role very likely to produce that value measured this way. So now that I have those must-haves, now everything that I do in the hiring process, everything should be geared toward interviewing for being able to know this person does or doesn't have those must-haves and how strong are they. So when I get to my final candidates, my final 3 candidates, I can look at if I've got 5 must-haves, I've rated each of them on a 1 to 5 on each of those must-haves. And maybe it's not just me, it's me plus another interview person. So we get 2 different viewpoints on at least on these 3 final candidates. Now I make my best hire based upon those must-haves. And this is where I want to come back to. Interviewing should not be about everything. The majority of your interview, 70%, should be based on interviewing to see where this person stands on those must-haves. In an ideal world, you just would have worked with them for a year or 2 and see how their demonstrated performance is, which would allow you to really know what their scores are on those must-haves. But hey, we don't live in that world. We have to make our best bet, place our money down, hire that person. So when I'm interviewing, here's the big mistake that I was coaching this particular client about. I want to share the same advice to you. And one of the advantages of being a business coach is myself and the dozen other Maui coaches, we've collectively worked with tens of thousands of different companies over the years. And on those companies, we get to see what they do well that works and what they do that doesn't work that fails. In the interview process, here's what doesn't work. Asking them questions like, how would you blank? Anytime I ask somebody, how would ... it's a crappy way of interviewing. It is absolutely a crappy way of interviewing. Why? Everyone knows the theoretical answer. Instead, I shouldn't say, how would you? I should say, how did you? So let's give some examples. When I interview this way, this is a huge difference. Please, I know it seems like a small little difference. Hey, we're just saying from how would you handle this situation to how did you handle this situation? I want to interview for their actual behaved past. So for example, let's say I'm hiring for a COO. And I said one of the must-haves was that they need to have at least a 10-year success track record of successfully playing the role of COO or an equivalent role, depending if they have a different title for it, in an enterprise that's similar in scale to the company that you're trying to build over the next 2 to 5 years. So if you're currently at $50 million per year, and you think over the next, say, 3 to 5 years, you're going to double that to $100 million, I don't want to be interviewing a COO that's only worked with a $10 million company. That's not good enough. And I also don't want to work with a COO that's only worked with a $10 billion company. You say, well, why not? They must be great. They ran as a COO for a $10 billion company. Well, the skills and experience that's needed to take a $50 million company to a $100 million company is very different from being this of a 10, 50, $100 billion company. They're different skill sets. And so they're different experience sets. I want the person who has, in this case, 10 years of success record for that. And one of the things I might say for another must-have in this role is they must be able to be very direct, but to do it in a way that is effective, right? This person needs to be effective and not sweeping stuff under the rug. I need this person to speak the truth, even when it's unpleasant, even when it's uncomfortable, but they need to be able to do it in an effective manner. Sometimes that needs to be graceful. Sometimes that needs to be strong and forceful. Sometimes that needs to be curious. Sometimes that needs to be, right? So now I come back to the interview. I don't say, tell me here, Cheryl, how would you handle if a team member you saw that was managing a portion of operations, if they consistently failed to meet the standards that have been set, the goals that have been set for them, how would you address that with them? I say, David, that sounds like a great question. It's not. A better question would say, Cheryl, I want you to think of a specific time in your business past where you had to deal with a team member who was under you and you were managing, that was responsible for some really important parts of producing for the company, but they consistently were underperforming. Let me know when you've got a specific example in mind. You do? Great. Quickly, lay out the context. Set the scene for me. Okay? All right? And so when you noticed that this went on, what did you do? Got it. When you did that, how did they respond? Okay? When they responded that way, then what did you do? When you did that, then what happened? When that happened, tell me what you did next. And if you notice, the pattern is very clear about not what would they theoretically do. It's all about building this example of what they actually did. I put them in the moment. I want to know enough context. Who is it with? I don't need the last name. Give me a first name, right? What was the context? What I don't want them doing is saying something like, oh, well, I can remember times when that happened. It's quite frequent. And typically when those things happen, what I would do is blank. No, 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 no. When they do that, I say, stop. What I'm asking for you is a specific instance. Take a moment, gather your thoughts. What's a specific instance where that happened? Who was it with? Just the first name. Okay, it was with Joanne. Got it. And give me the quick context, the 30, 60 seconds context. Got it. So when you observed this from Joanne, what did you do at first? Got it. When you did that, then what happened? When that happened, then what did you do next? I really have to bring it back. I want to root her in the experience so that I can interview not for what they would do, but for what they actually did. And I know this seems like a subtle difference, but it makes all the difference. It makes all the difference. The last thing I want to share with you here was also coaching that I gave to this particular client. And by the way, one of the nice things about working as a business coach, as long as we have, is we've started to build a really good base of clients that are just delightful to work with. The thing I'll share with you is that her response to the feedback could have been one of two ways. And there's a reason she's going to be building, a company of the scale she's building. The way she took the feedback was, David, that was incredibly helpful. Thank you. Here's what I'm doing with it. Here's what I'll do. She embraced it. She owned it because she saw that it was there for value for her, right? I've watched many different business owners, most of whom are not ever going to be a client of ours, thankfully. And the way they would take input, like for example, they might show up to a workshop of ours. They pay the public price, they attend the event, systems and controls, scale event, the financial pillar super course, the growth hacking event, whatever the course is, it doesn't matter. They attend and we get to have a conversation, perhaps at a break or at the lunchtime, and they share with me their biggest challenge in the company. And at this point, there's a lot of pattern recognition in what I do. And so I'll give them, hey, X, Y, and Z are the most likely ways for you to solve that challenge. And the way they respond is they argue with it. They get defensive about it. They feel uncomfortable with it because they feel less than. The most successful clients we have, they don't respond that way. They welcome it. They embrace it. They take the valuable parts, and the parts that don't fit, they let kind of fall to the wayside. So as you hear me share this with you about interviewing, about sequencing, if some of this struck a nerve, and the next question I'm going to ask probably will strike a nerve, ask yourself, which of those two ways do you want to be? Do you want to be like our clients, that we coach every day and that have extraordinarily successful companies, not just in terms of revenue and profits and margins, but more importantly, that these companies have matured so that they're much more owner independent, so that the owner gets his or her life back? Or do you want to be like the average business owner that gets trapped in their business, that basically gets defensive, et cetera? So here's the question. It's very direct. It's right between the eyes. What is your current success rate with hires? If you go back over the last 10 hires that you made, whether that was this year or it took you the last 10 years, but look at the last 10 hires that you made, how many of those would you rate as successful hires? Now, successful hires doesn't mean that they actually still work for you or not, but if they don't work for you and you had to let them go, that's clearly not a successful hire. And you might find that out of those 10, 2 or 3 are still working for you or more, but are they successfully working for you? You don't have to tell anyone else, but you have to tell yourself the truth. Experiences before we coach clients, the typical success rate for the average business owner is 30 to 50%. So 3 out of 5, probably 3 to 5 hires out of 10 would be successful, which means that 5 to 7 out of 10 are unsuccessful. Whether they stayed with you or not, that's not the only marker of success. By making the changes I've just shared with you, detailing who you need, interviewing for the must-haves, interviewing about what they did do, not what they would do, you're going to take your odds of success from 30 to 50% success rate, and you're going to bump that up to a 50 to 70, maybe even a 75, or even gulp 80% success rate. Now, there's more coaching that I would need to do to get you to 75 or 80%. You'll probably never be above 80% success rate. That would be unrealistic over the long term with a large body of hires, especially in a rapidly growing organization. So I hope this really struck home for you. I want you to thrive as a company. The whole reason we created the Business Coach as a podcast, the whole reason 20 some odd years ago we started Maui Mastermind to work with successful business owners to help them take their business and go from where they were with a middle stage level 2 owner reliant company or a rapidly growth company that still relied on the owner for much of the leadership, to make it grow to the point where it truly is owner independent and grow and scale, increase valuation, et cetera. The reason we've been doing that all these years is because I know the difference it makes, not just in the lives of you, the owner, but in your family, in the employees that work for you, and in their families too. Having watched enough companies go under when the founder got hurt and their company had no real life beyond the owner, and having met enough very successful business people, but their companies own them. They didn't own their company. I just don't want that for you. I want more for you. So I hope today hit a nerve in a healthy way. I encourage you to embrace what I shared, to own it, to absorb it, to take what you can that's useful from you and let the rest go. Thank you for joining me for this episode of The Business Coach, and I look forward to talking with you again next week. Bye-bye, everybody.